Costanoa County is my fictional city that I'm building on the San Francisco map in City Skylines 2. I've been taking inspiration from the actual city, but my goal has always been to imbue my own vision onto the build as well. In today's video, I want to take a journey through time and give a recap of the first 10 episodes in the series. One of the goals of this video is to give newcomers to the channel a chance to catch up on what's been going on in the series, but I also want to provide some additional backstory for those who've been following from the beginning. So without further ado, let's kick things off with episode number 1. Because the first episode didn't really have a specific build, I won't go over any of what I built. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the naming of this build. There's two inspirations for it. The first is that San Francisco County is a county that consists of only one city, which is San Francisco. So I wanted to have county in the name because I felt like that was just kind of something that I thought was interesting. The other has to do with the history of the region. San Francisco's history includes Spanish exploration, Mexican governance, and the famed gold rush of 1849, among other things. However, lesser known is that the San Francisco Peninsula lies on the Aboriginal lands of the Ohlone people, and the Ohlone are also referred to as Costanoans. So that's where I got the first half of the name, as I wanted to honor the deep history of the region beyond just what we typically hear about. And that also leads into one of the inspirations for the city of Costanoa, and probably one of the first elements of the story behind the city, is that I wanted to imagine a place where the Aboriginal peoples had a greater influence on the city's development and growth, and that's part of the reason why I've preserved some of the natural elements of the map throughout the build. In episode 2, I added in some of the key services. One of those is garbage management, and then I also added a power plant over by the industrial area, as well as a farm. I also added some residential zoning throughout the city, as well as extended the grid past our main street, which is called Market Street, and then added some additional residential there as well. And that specific grid extension is a callback to what I just said, where I wanted to add in some more natural elements. So you'll see some pedestrian paths around there that kind of cut through green spaces around the homes. And part of that is also just making use of the hillside. In episode 3, I introduced the waterfront road, and I gave it the same name as the one in San Francisco has, which is the Embarcadero. I once again filled out the zoning in the center of the city with some additional commercial zoning as well as residential. And then also the industrial park expanded a little bit with some more industrial buildings. In this episode, we also got our first high school, but due to budget constraints, I wasn't able to detail the high school at this point. So instead, I added in some more residential zoning around it. In episode 4, I started off with adding in an entirely new industrial park near the landfill. Its positioning on the water is largely due to the fact that the wind blows from west to east on the San Francisco Peninsula, and that is mirrored in the map here. So the wind is blowing out over the bay, and therefore the industrial parks make use of that and blow that pollution out away from the residential areas. I also added in what is probably my first dedicated residential build, where I really went in and tried to detail everything. It was about this time that we got the new French assets into the game, so I wanted to make use of those, and I think they're very good looking buildings. And I ended up with something that I think looks pretty good. At this point, I had also bought another tile and was able to make use of that to add in some more farms on the other side of the highway. By episode 5, I had the funds to at least detail the first half of the high school, which was the main campus here, and I added in a few sports facilities and an extension wing there. Once again, I added in a lot more zoning and then detailed some empty spaces with trees throughout the city. I did the same thing with that big open space. I put in some trees there because I felt like it looked a little bit barren, and it just makes the city a lot more vibrant and energetic. I also placed down that new French water tower, and I'm basically using it in place of a lighthouse. So visually it's a lighthouse, but it acts as a water tower as well as sewage treatment for the city. And you'll also notice that the landfill was moved, so I added in a small park there while I moved the landfill to the other side of the water. In episode 6, I paid a little bit more attention to the highway area and the neighborhoods surrounding it. So first of all, I detailed the highway. I added some trees to block some wind, and conceptually to just add more separation from the farmland and the city. You'll notice too that the farms themselves were expanded a little bit, and that's just due to me picking up a few extra tiles there. And then if we pan over the high school, there's some additional homes there as well as a new football field. In episode 7, we start to see the effects of having a more mature city. And one of those effects is that we start having some wealthier citizens who might be property developers, and they start developing our neighborhoods. First of all, we have the neighborhood over here on this small peninsula, and that one has the rock musician mansion in it. And then over on the Embarcadero, this is just a small neighborhood, but it makes use of the Balder Pine signature building. And then the other is an addition to the low rent housing complex that I made in an earlier episode. So my thinking behind this and the story element that drives this is that Costanoa is now large enough to have multiple different property developers who want to build the most attractive neighborhoods in the city and also want to live in those neighborhoods themselves. And the first two I showed might be the result of that, and then the other one, that more low rent housing neighborhood, might be the investment that produces the capital to allow for those other neighborhoods to be built. And then finally over here by the farms, I added in a recreational area with a soccer field and a community pool. And then adjacent to that is a new elementary school with a bunch of extension wings because elementary school students are just everywhere in this game. Episode 8 was the first transit episode, and I started things off pretty simple with just a bus depot and 2 lines. I threw the bus depot over by the water there, kind of on the side of a hill, and that was based on a real-life bus depot that I've biked past many times in San Francisco. By now, we had the new French assets, German assets, and UK assets. So I went into the downtown core and did a little bit of redevelopment with some of those assets here, and made this nice corner right here, which makes use of all 3 of those asset packs. In episode 9, I realized that I was missing a bus line that I probably should have had in the first place, so I added that in there, and what that did is it gave us a few extra nodes where transit intersected with each other. So what I did is I increased the density around those nodes, and that's what you're seeing here, is a lot of row homes, but also some taller buildings in the downtown core here that's starting to build up. It was also at this point that I realized I was going about the garbage management all wrong and making improper assessment of how much I needed. So after doing the most that I could with the landfill, I ended up adding a recycling center near the second industrial park. In episode 10, I took out one of the farms and I got a start on a small neighborhood. And this neighborhood is inspired by Japantown in San Francisco, and it makes use of some of those Japanese assets as well as the UK elementary school. And then as we get over here to the center of the city, this is one of my favorite builds, and it's actually a supermarket as well as a new high school. The thing I really like about it is that supermarket asset specifically just looks really realistic, and I think makes a lot of sense for a town of this size. And because we had taken out the farms for that Japantown neighborhood, I also added in some new farms after buying some tiles. And that is going to do it for this video. Like I said at the beginning, I hope if you are a returning viewer, you are able to get a better understanding of my overall vision for the city. And if you're new to the channel, I hope you feel pretty well caught up at this point. In either case, there's more to come from Costanoa County, and I'm going to do my best to add more story elements into the build as I go. But with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.